Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by the Black Church Traditions and African American Faith Life program at Phillips Seminary, with an online art showcase of a sacred commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Online at wherefaithleads.com/art.
Coming up on Focus Black Oklahoma, we take a deep dive into House Bill 1775, its authors, its opponents, and its repercussions in classrooms across the state. We speak with two Oklahoma City activists who met with a state legislator following the lawmaker's controversial remarks about the Black Lives Matter movement. We visit Turley to better understand why it's a town, but it's also not a town. We hear the experiences of a North Tulsa-based dispensary owner who opened his doors during the pandemic and the community activist who never wanted those doors opened in the second installment of our series, Blacks and Cannabis. And we celebrate a poet and professor who is now an NAACP Image Award winner. All this and more just ahead on Focus Black Oklahoma.
This is Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Colby Webster.
And I'm Kuma Roberts. As the academic school year quickly approaches, the debate on teaching critical race theory remains at the forefront of the minds of teachers, students, and legislators. House Bill 1775 presents many challenges for what students can and cannot learn in Oklahoma classrooms. Here's Garrett Yalch with the story.
To me, these are statements that are contained in this bill that every Oklahoman should support.
That's State Representative Chad Caldwell, who represents Enid as a Republican. He's talking about Oklahoma House Bill 1775, which he co-authored. The statements Caldwell referenced ban public universities from requiring diversity training, and they prohibit public school teachers from teaching 8 specific concepts often associated with critical race theory. For example, teachers now cannot say that certain races are oppressive, nor can they say that individuals should feel discomfort or guilt because of the actions of their ancestors.
You're essentially telling a student how they should feel. That goes beyond teaching history.
But many critics disagree. Professor Rick Tepker, a seasoned constitutional law scholar at the University of Oklahoma, is one such critic.
The law itself, if you look at the actual text of the law, has a lot of platitudes in it, some of which I don't think anybody really objects to. But the one that's problematic is the one that says you shouldn't be making anybody ashamed of our past, our country. And the truth is, there's an awful lot about the past that should make us feel ashamed.
Tepker, who has argued academic freedom cases in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, asserts that the bill is not just morally wrong, but also unconstitutional.
I think there are several elements that are constitutionally problematic, but it's quite possible if a school board tells a teacher that they shouldn't tell the story of the Colfax race riot,
The 1873 race massacre in Louisiana.
because of 1775, that they're going to violate the Constitution and a federal court ought to tell them so.
Representative Caldwell, when asked about the bill's constitutionality, said he didn't have the expertise to push back against Professor Tepker.
Well, first response is that on that particular issue, he's obviously a lot more experienced than I am, so it'd be hard for me to push back. If somebody wants to challenge the law, I think that's absolutely their right, and that's the role of the courts to determine the constitutionality of that. It's not up to the legislature.
State Representative John Waldron, a Democrat from Tulsa and former Booker T. Washington history teacher who opposed the bill, says what teachers can and can't say shouldn't be up to the legislature either.
Taken to its greatest extent, what this legislation does is it encourages teachers to avoid any sensitive topic, which effectively, and the word is perfect for the job, whitewashes our history and gives us a false understanding of our society. Teachers do feel the weight of the legislature looking over their shoulders, and it's going to have a depressing effect.
Representative Waldron also notes that Republicans have struggled to provide evidence of the concepts banned in the bill being taught in schools, and that, to a certain extent, this bill is a solution in search of a problem.
Indisputably, it's a bill designed to censor teachers in advance for stuff that we claim they might be saying, even though the legislature brought no evidence forward that critical race theory was being used.
To Waldron's point, even after repeated efforts to locate an Oklahoma K-12 teacher who uses critical race theory or related concepts for this story, we weren't able to find one. But Caldwell disagrees with the critique that there's no evidence of these concepts being taught in Oklahoma.
I gave an example on the House floor of a class down at OU. I heard directly from one of the students in a class whose professor separated the students based on their race, their sex, their socioeconomic status, marital status of their parents, basically labeling them oppressors and oppressed and things like that. We've also heard from parents and teachers around the state that have talked about here are some instances where this is occurring in our classrooms.
I asked him if he had seen any examples of this problem in his home district of Enid.
I will say not that I've verified. I've definitely heard some stories of some, I think, concerns about maybe things that would be approaching this, but again, I didn't necessarily verify. Hadn't verified them.
I asked the same question of State Representative Kevin West from Moore, the lead author of House Bill 1775, during a short phone call.
To the best of my knowledge, it's not happening here in Moore. I've not been notified of that.
But Caldwell maintains that even if these critical race theory-like concepts aren't being taught much in our state, he still thinks the bill is necessary.
Again, I think these are simply things that we should say regardless of whether it's happened or not. We don't want it to happen in our schools. And we shouldn't be waiting for something bad to happen before we say we don't want it to happen. So I do think there is some potential for it to continue to grow, to get worse.
As for the future, according to Representative West, the fight isn't over. Oklahoma House Republicans plan to go further. While West says he isn't exactly sure what this further legislation will look like, he says it's definitely on Republicans' radar.
We're keeping a close eye on from the legislature. And, there's still a whole bunch of other things, something like a Student's Bill of Rights or, something along those lines.
But Representative Waldron worries that Republicans have already gone too far, not because of a real problem, but instead one that has been, in many ways, manufactured by social media.
Is the problem in the classroom or on the screen of your iPhone? Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. Here we are talking on the radio about an issue, and that's great. But the medium in which people take news, you're right, is mostly an information bubble that was created by algorithms and our own preferences and what we click on.
And these algorithms are tailored using artificial intelligence to make us engage for longer. Dramatic but rare examples of teachers calling all white people racist, for example, can be quite engaging. Representative Caldwell told me about how often he saw examples of critical race theory in his Twitter feed.
I'm not a big social media guy, but if you spend about 10 minutes on Twitter, you can see examples. I just saw one today of a teacher in Iowa, a high school teacher in Iowa, talking about why it's so important that she's able to teach this type of material.
And when stories like this one from Iowa are vastly overrepresented in people's news feeds, they begin to feel as if the problem is much larger than it actually is. And when I asked Caldwell about this phenomenon, he actually agreed.
Yeah, I would agree. It's what we have turned into people see snippets. They don't necessarily investigate the rest of the story or the context. And this is done on all sides of the political spectrum and everything else.
This ends up driving our current political landscape away from more substantive topics like economic policy and towards more symbolic issues like critical race theory that make catchy headlines and tweets but don't have much of an impact on the average Oklahoman's life.
Right or wrong, good or bad, the people back home, they care a lot about the social issues. And it doesn't matter whether you are Republican or Democrat. When you're out knocking doors, I get asked a lot more about things like this or abortion or guns or whatever. The culture divide is very real and it's on all sides of that. So I do think there's an element that we are responding somewhat to our constituents back home.
But Waldron thinks Republicans aren't responding to their constituents' desires, but instead taking advantage of the cultural divide for political reasons.
We have a governor who wants to be president, We have a Senate seat possibly opening up soon. We have a vacancy in the Attorney General's position. And we have ambitious politicians who want to run for state superintendent of education, maybe a congressional seat, and they're all figuring out how they're going to win these elections. They're going to win elections by driving voters to the polls. And so they find the things that they think they can use to outrage voters.
And so far, it has worked. According to a Morning Consult poll conducted in mid-June, of Republicans who had heard of critical race theory, over 2/3 described their view of it as very unfavorable. Professor Tepker says that this outrage-centric model of politics, which he argues occurs on both sides of the political spectrum, is very bad for our country and has led to increasingly authoritarian impulses like censorship among both political extremes.
But what we've got is this. You've got a group of individuals who want to resort to power, legislative or administrative power, to stop critical race theory. And you've got a lot of advocates of critical race theory who are all too willing to use the same methods and techniques to promote their ideological agenda. And standing in the way is the academic freedom of individual professors and students who are essentially being told by both sides that they have to comply, conform their approaches. It's a two-front assault on individual academic freedom by administrators who are all too willing to claim a right to control far beyond their ordinary office and mission in past years.
To give an example of this authoritarianism materializing on the political left, Professor Tepker cited an incident at OU when a professor, after issuing a warning, read a quote to her class that contained the N-word to demonstrate its toxicity. But Tepker says her good intentions were disregarded. She was berated, and the OU administration's university-wide response was more mandatory requirements for professors and limits on their academic freedom.
That's not the way you develop academic policies in a university. The faculty senate caved, and academic freedom went undefended. And they didn't want to hear from me. They knew me pretty well, and they know where I stand on these things. I'm basically against all sorts of mandatory indoctrination. And that's what this was. It's very regrettable. It's very dangerous. I'm going to essentially be rooting for opposition to both the critical race theory motivated administrators and the anti-CRT legislators. I think they both have it wrong.
Professor Tepker notes that this isn't just an Oklahoma problem. These same trends are shared nationally. In similar times to this one in American history, Tepker argues that things haven't ended well.
If you ask in American history, what is the closest thing to this, I'm afraid I have to say the 1850s, which led to a civil war. And that's a scary thought.
Tepker is not alone in this conclusion either. Other academics like Peter Turchin, an evolutionary anthropologist at the University of Connecticut, have found empirical evidence that indicates that the United States is as politically stressed as it was leading up to the Civil War. But perhaps this is no more than a temporary bubble of division caused in part by the novelty of social media.
We're just in the beginning of the social media age. We're figuring it out. Ultimately, the people have to have a responsibility to use filters when they consume media, when they read the news. We're going to have to become much more media literate. And that's a job of education, but it's a darn shame that we're censoring educators now, isn't it?
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Garrett Yalch in Oklahoma City.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma.
There's a COVID wave ahead, say Oklahoma health experts, due to the rise in Delta variant cases. The Oklahoma State Medical Association says unvaccinated Oklahomans are at risk for getting the deadlier strain of this virus. Officials say the challenge lies in reaching the 50% of those who remain unvaccinated.
Staff shortages continue to challenge the Oklahoma State Department of Corrections, which is experiencing low employment numbers across all areas of the system. According to Director Scott Crow, the DOC is lacking over 300 correctional officers and other roles that stem from recruiting issues. With starting pay at $15.75 an hour, officials say it's not about salary, it's recruitment that remains the largest obstacle.
Oklahoma teachers may be subject to having their teaching licenses suspended for teaching certain concepts related to race and racism under new rules approved by the State Board of Education. With only one opposing vote, the Oklahoma State Board approved emergency rules to comply with the Republican-led ban on what is now called critical race theory, which prohibits teaching racial concepts.
Asher Public Schools in Pottawatomie County and 10 other rural school districts have been awarded funds for a new innovative fine arts program for next school year. Oklahoma Art Tech is a $5.8 million grant for over 5 years to expand access to the visual arts, dance, drama, and music. State Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister says that, quote, the infusion of fine arts into the classroom promotes engagement that enriches overall student learning and achievement, and is an evidence-based strategy that supports the success of the whole child, unquote.
Governor Kevin Stitt is being sued by several Oklahomans who believe he didn't have the authority to end the coronavirus-related unemployment assistance programs. If the lawsuit is successful, the weekly cash payment could be restored for the tens of thousands of Oklahomans who remain unemployed.
A new appellate court's opinion that the odor of cannabis is probable cause creates concern for at least one local lawmaker. Representative Scott Fettgatter of Okmulgee says the ruling shows that Oklahoma still has a long way to go on regulations for the legal medical marijuana industry. The court overturned a 2019 ruling determining Oklahoma's legal medical cannabis program, quote, in no way affects a police officer's formation of probable cause based upon the presence or odor of marijuana, unquote.
A June book display and exhibit celebrating Pride Month and the LGBTQ+ community came under fire recently by the Enid Public Library Board and Enid residents. The board overseeing the public library convened for the first time since the pandemic incited lockdowns in March with a public meeting to welcome new board members and discuss with the community the library's book display and book display policies. Some community members and board members noted that LGBTQ+ related books should be allowed to help LGBTQ+ kids and adults feel safe, welcome, and accepted at the library. Others noted a preference for popular religious views instead. All proposed displays or exhibits are approved by the library's director or deputy director.
California is on the cusp of approving reparations for the few surviving victims of the country's largest mass sterilization program 40 years after the state repealed a eugenics law that allowed medical officials to force the sterilization of more than 20,000 people, including many who suffered from disabilities and psychiatric disorders. The legislation sets aside $7.5 million for payments to victims, and it was included in the state budget. It currently awaits signature from Governor Gavin Newsom.
In a press conference that coincided with the 56th anniversary of the signing of the Voting Rights Act, the Poor People's Campaign, led by Bishop William Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris, are calling for the Biden administration to pass several of their legislative priorities that have stalled in Congress. The top priority is ending the filibuster, a procedural rule that requires most legislation to win 60 votes to move forward in the Senate. The rule effectively gives the Senate minority the power to block most legislation. The Poor People's Campaign and its allies will stage various rallies and protests across the country, including a woman-led moral march in Washington, D.C.
A Confederate monument at the center of Charlottesville, Virginia, and the violent 2017 Unite the Right rally has been removed. The removal comes after years of legal fights, community anguish, and the death of Heather Heyer, who was peacefully protesting the night of the rally. Statues of both General Robert E. Lee and General Thomas Stonewall Jackson were removed. Their stone pedestals will remain until the City Council can make a final decision about them.
A new lawsuit involving the Breonna Taylor murder case claims that Louisville police are withholding public records that may reveal that there is condemning body camera footage of the murder, which is yet to be seen. To date, no one has been charged directly for the death of Breonna Taylor, who was killed on the evening of March 13, 2020, by Louisville police officers conducting a no-knock search warrant. 3 plainclothes officers, Brett Hankison, Miles Cosgrove, and Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, fired a total of 32 shots into Taylor's apartment. Louisville police say that camera footage of the murder does not exist due to the officers not wearing body cameras or having them turned off.
Former Cherokee chief and Tahlequah, Oklahoma native Wilma Mankiller will soon appear on a set of commemorative quarters issued by the U.S. Mint. The first woman to serve as assistant principal chief and who also went on to become principal chief of the Cherokee Nation will appear on her own set of coins along with other sets that feature author Maya Angelou, astronaut Sally Ride, suffragist Adelina Otero Warren, and actress Anna Mae Wong as part of the American Woman Quarters program. Mankiller was also a community activist, social worker, community developer, and author. She passed away in 2010.
14-year-old Zalia Avantgarde, the first African-American winner of the Scripps National Spelling Bee, was offered full-ride scholarships to 3 different colleges, including Louisiana State University. Avantgarde is the first African-American winner in the Bee's 96-year history, and also holds 3 Guinness World Records for various basketball handling tricks, including dribbling 6 basketballs simultaneously.
Black Lives Matter faces comparisons to terrorist groups from the Oklahoma House floor during remarks made amidst the debate on House Bill 1775. Focus Black Oklahoma's Devin Williams has details.
On April 29, 2021, Representative Justin Humphrey said, quote, "Would you agree that when people burn, threaten, kill, intimidate, that they are a terrorist group and that Black Lives Matter meets that same description?" End quote.
These were inflammatory remarks that are representative of exactly what he thinks. Whether or not that is exactly what his constituents think is another question. That is what he represents them as thinking.
This remark was made during arguments over the controversial House Bill 1775, which prohibits state colleges and universities from requiring gender or sexual diversity training or counseling. It also prohibits school employees from incorporating certain messages about sex and/or race into any course instruction, including but not limited to critical race theory, or CRT. After signing the bill into law on May 7, 2021, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt said, quote, "As governor, I believe that not 1 cent of taxpayer money should be used to divide young Oklahomans about their race or sex," end quote. Even though the focal point for many of the 161 representatives that voted to pass the bill is CRT, a college-level concept that would not be taught as K-12 education.
It seems the legislature is at war with Oklahomans, especially Oklahomans of color and especially Black Oklahomans. Anytime we try to use our voice at the Capitol or in any sort of way, they're continuing to days later write legislation to stop us from being vocal and advocate for ourselves. Like the group of protesters who were at the Capitol before we tried to go in the gallery, they were there speaking up for themselves in a way that the legislature is not used to. They were scared. Governor Stitt was scared for no reason except for being held accountable. We are driving down a street that had several pathways for success or for movement, and the Oklahoma legislature is blocking that pathways of legislation that stops us from being able to do our civic duty, which is advocating for ourselves.
Concerned by Humphrey's comparison and HB 1775, constituents and BLM representatives Jakia Harrison, Jasmine Elizabeth Brown Jutras, and Josh Higginbotham requested an unscheduled meeting with Representative Humphrey in his office at the Oklahoma State Capitol building. After he accepted the meeting, Jasmine explains how the conversation quickly turned hostile.
The first insulting thing was asking if the KKK had ever lynched somebody. When we were silent because we were confused as to why he would ever ask that, he looked like he had just won the conversation, and he asserted himself by standing up over us to let us know that we have the audacity to come to his office and ask him questions, but can't even answer a simple question of his, so why should he still continue speaking with us? We then let him know, you still have to speak with us because you are our representative, and he let us know we do not belong to District 19. Therefore, we have no reason to speak with him, and he has no reason to speak with us.
According to the Equal Justice Initiative, or EJI, between 1865 and 1960, nearly 6,500 people were lynched in America. Nearly 90% of those people were Black. All of those lynchings are examples of white supremacist terrorism perpetuated by white Americans with terrorist organizations, including the KKK. Josh Higginbotham provided the example Representative Humphrey requested.
It's not ignorance. This is by design. People are not supposed to know about these sorts of things because you would then have to do something about that.
After some back and forth, Representative Humphrey decided to remove the trio and called the authorities, but not before one final confrontational outburst.
The troopers, they were on their way. He had called his LA to have them come. In the midst of this, we were trying to make calls. He walked to the door. Now he's blocking any way for us to leave. And if myself or Jakia stand up as a black woman, that could be perceived as confrontational or a violent act. We had no position to leave if we wanted to. We did not want to. Jakia is beginning to be very upset that he's decided to call the officers, and she's letting him know that the racism, the misogyny, everything leading up to this point is you are the reason that we have to fight every day. And she's just clearly upset. And he's standing at the door looking at her and smirking and laughing at her pain. At this point, she has angry tears. I said, "Are you smirking right now?" And he looked at me and continued smirking. And I said, "Are you truly laughing at this black woman's pain? She is letting you know that she is upset visually and verbally." And he's like, "Yes, because that disturbs me. She disturbs me." You know that moment when you're so mad you can't help but to laugh? So I kind of laughed and I was like, "She disturbs you?" And he said, "Yes, and you disgust me." In that moment, he told two black women that we were disturbing and disgusting.
Undeterred by the presence of 6 police officers, the trio of activists remained stalwart until Jakia realized that Humphrey's legislative assistant, another black woman, had been listening to the altercation in the hallway directly outside of his office. The three decided to leave and spare another black woman the trauma of continuing a seemingly fruitless conversation. At the time of this recording, no response has been received from Representative Humphrey nor his office. However, Jasmine has one last thing she would like Representative Humphrey to know.
I am quite positive that he feels he won the war. He got what he wanted and we were escorted out of the room. We probably will never be allowed back in that room. Our intention is to make sure this story is continued to be heard and that he knows this is not over. We will make sure he is held accountable for his words.
For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Devin Williams in Oklahoma City.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma. Turley residents rely on Tulsa County for basic services, yet it still lacks the ability to become a city in its own right and overcome fears that it's a burden to Tulsa and surrounding areas. Jamie Glisson tells us more.
Officially, Turley is defined as a census-designated place in Tulsa County, Oklahoma. Unofficially, Turley is a township or suburb of Tulsa. Over the years, many efforts have been made to change the fate of this unincorporated piece of land that has no local government. The residents of Turley rely on Tulsa County to provide basic services such as fire and police protection, as well as water and schooling. On the morning of Juneteenth, I met Turley local Chaz Stevens on his family farm, and he took me on a tour of his hometown.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a left, and then we're going to make a right here on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. This street was originally named Cincinnati, but it was renamed to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard a few years ago. I'm not a big fan of it being named that, primarily because there's always a negative connotation that comes with that street name. And the street name changes back to Cincinnati when you get to downtown Tulsa, when you get to the white businesses. The white businesses did not want to change the name of their street.
According to the most recent American Community Survey data, the racial composition of Turley was almost 60% white, 16% black, and 8% Native American, with a little over 16% identifying as other races.
So we are now officially in Turley. We have our beautiful sign. It was created by some locals here. It originally had a different look to it, but that sign became old, withered, broke down. So some local citizens here put up the money and they built the sign themselves. So it's really cool to know that the community still cares about having the image of Turley. and it's a handmade sign, it's not like they went to a store. So it shows that Turley is definitely full of people who are willing to work hard and appreciate the things that they have and try to do the best with what they can. So it's beautiful to see in this community.
Chaz was quick to point out that Turley can be a great place to live and raise a family. But things like the city of Tulsa building a detention center across the street from an elementary school interfere with the positive progression the community needs. While some feel that Tulsa should annex the rest of Turley so they can have more of a voice and benefit from the services an established city can provide, others enjoy being free and ungoverned by a municipality. In 1995, an effort to annex Turley into Sperry, Oklahoma, died. During the town hall meeting, Sperry officials voiced concern about how their city could take care of Turley when it could barely take care of itself. Sperry residents felt threatened that once Turley became a part of their town, the larger voting bloc of Turley residents would overpower Sperry residents. The effort to annex began to die after the meeting, as it became clear Sperry's citizens were not interested. The current chair of the Turley Community Association, Jason Turley, no relation to the namesake of the area, offered mixed feelings regarding Turley's status.
It is a plus in the sense that there's no city ordinance out here. We don't, some people might have their yards a little bit overgrown, not to an unsatisfactory condition, but more so than what you'd find in a neighborhood that has an HOA or something. I don't know. It's just a lot of people live out in this area because they just don't want to be a part of the city limits. They sure do like being close to it, they sure do like when Tulsa Fire Department shows up, but they don't want Tulsa. It's always been bad blood between Tulsa and Turley. Tulsa's always treated Turley like it's, stepchild that it never wanted. I kind of blame Tulsa for the way Turley has turned out, and it's never been able to incorporate because they kind of put a squeeze on us years ago. They made it to where we would never be able to incorporate into a town because they moved their fence line so close to the boundaries of Turley that the laws wouldn't allow Turley to incorporate as a town itself. And then those previous people worked with Seneca Scott, I believe, and they helped change the laws to where it don't matter how close you are to a city limit. If you want to be at your own town, you can be.
In 2004, House Bill 1858, written by Representative Darrell Gilbert, passed with a vote of 95-0 and was approved by Governor Bradford Henry on May 25th. Gilbert's bill changed the law to allow areas within 5 miles of the corporate limits of a city with a population of more than 200,000 to incorporate. Residents would have to document to county commissioners that their town historically has been identified as a community. Gilbert was quoted saying, quote, "I did this for Turley. This helps the town of Turley be able to incorporate if they want to," end quote.
Turley's a great place to live. It's low to medium income housing. A lot of people enjoy it out here. They enjoy the quietness. Turley needs progress. I think the biggest challenge is getting people out here to help determine what that progress is. We like the peaceful community out here. We need to somehow find a way to intertwine that with an ever-growing society.
Salvage yards and automotive shops dominate the small business landscape in the area. Chaz went into more detail regarding these businesses, while Jason talked about what he would like to see come to Turley. First we hear from Chaz, then Jason.
Like you see, cars, that's kind of our thing here. We have a lot of salvage yards. People come, scrap metal, sell parts, things like that. So it's one of those weird things when you drive down a main street and you see so many, abandoned cars, useless cars that have been destroyed, So it's one of those things where you would like for a beautification to happen, but you also don't want to infringe on businesses that have been thriving here for decades in this community.
And yeah, there's no eateries out here. I'd like to see an eatery out here. Some sort of restaurant, whether it's a diner or something. Again, people are not looking for that Brahms to move in here. They're not looking for Quick Trip to move out here.
What does the future hold for a town without governance? How can Turley progress and thrive with little or no help? It was made clear that Turley is a community of fighters that do not give up, a community of people that look out for each other when no one else does. The Turley Community Association is in the process of becoming a 501c3 designated nonprofit. They are hoping to apply for grants and receive private donations to build up and invest in their community. There have even been talks of fundraising for a community center. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Jamie Glisson in Turley.
Local diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants are engaging with a major Fortune 500 company in Oklahoma City. Carlos Moreno brings us along to follow the progress after a catalytic year of global racial protests and organizations big and small making new commitments to Black communities.
Employees at Oklahoma City-based Heartland Payment Systems are hopeful that a significant milestone will mean greater accountability regarding corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Fortune magazine ranked Heartland's parent company, Global Payments, at 394 in the publication's coveted Fortune 500 list. This year marks the first time Global Payments is listed as a Fortune 500 company, after a 51% revenue increase in 2020. The company provides electronic payment processing, and as e-commerce and cashless payments are a must-have for businesses to keep operating during a global pandemic, the company's revenues last year reached $7.4 billion. With the company's elevated status comes greater responsibility towards minority employees. Fortune 500 companies today are measured not just on financial performance, but also metrics such as board of directors and manager diversity, pay gaps for women and minorities, and opportunities for advancement leading to more diverse company leadership. Nationally renowned bias, diversity, and inclusion expert Risha Grant says that in the wake of escalating racial tensions around the country, the corporate world is becoming increasingly open-minded and welcome to change.
I will say that companies are more willing to listen. You know, I've been at this 25 years, and at no other time in my life, in my professional career, have I felt that companies were doing anything but being reactive when it came to diversity and inclusion. I believe they're no longer checking the box. I won't say all of them, but the ones that I've been fortunate to work with, and I've worked with some of the largest corporations we have in the world, is that they truly want to create change.
Founded in 1997 and having a large presence in Edmond since 2003, Heartland Payment Systems serves an estimated 400,000 clients nationwide and has approximately 4,300 employees, more than 900 of whom are in the process of moving into the company's 2 new corporate offices in downtown Oklahoma City. The company provides point-of-sale, online, and mobile payment processing services for retail stores, bars, restaurants, hotels, and other businesses. Following nationwide protests over the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, Heartland looked for ways that the company could provide better support for its Black employees. Senior Product Advisor Will Simmons and Sales Management Recruiter Jimmy Colbert were part of a team that founded Heartland Onyx, a resource for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and LGBTQ+ employees. I talked with Will about the importance of these resources for Heartland.
So it was created as an employer resource group dedicated to Black employees. Heartland has mostly white male, white female dominated executive management. And we've expressed it that, is a concern. Onyx Heartland Group that was created is that bridge, if you will. We've started to craft events and based on education and awareness, but more importantly to even kind of center on now this piece where we're now a Fortune 500 company and all of these other additives are in place now that support these things that we've been talking about. So we're very optimistic about the future and how that will play itself out.
The leadership of Heartland Onyx hopes that the group can both change the company's culture internally and work toward an innovative way of doing business, one that is not just transactional but more relationship-based. Jimmy discussed that building community relationships ultimately means a smart investment for Heartland.
Just community involvement. I know that sounds fairly simple, but I think Heartland is missing the boat on the amount of business that, first of all, that Black businesses can offer, but also just, now that we're a Fortune 500 company, I don't want Heartland to just go into those communities and just sell. It's something we've talked about on our calls before, is that I want them to be able to invest money into Black businesses or into the Black community. I don't want them to go in and just trying to capitalize. I also want them to feed those dollars into those communities. And then also, if you want to go in and sell after that, and build that reputation within the Black community, after you've shown that you're genuine and you go in and, put forth some effort into those relationships on the east side of Oklahoma City, then, we can talk about getting Heartland POS systems in those, in those companies.
Risha Grant is also hopeful that these changes encourage more companies in Oklahoma to improve their diversity and inclusion initiatives.
It is very positive. I feel empowered because when I started this journey all those years ago, I couldn't sell anybody on it. To see companies being proactive instead of reactive, to see them taking on these diversity initiatives from a global level. Yeah, it's amazing to see Oklahoma realizing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Heartland Onyx is planning a diverse speaker series that is open to all Heartland employees, as well as expanding its programming to offer mentorship and resources for minority employees to step into leadership roles. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Carlos Moreno in Oklahoma City.
Opening a dispensary is challenging on its own, but opening one during the height of the pandemic was even harder. Judy Williams has the story of how a North Tulsa man tries to bring what he sees as medical benefits to the community. We also hear from community members pushing back on the influx of dispensaries in their neighborhoods.
As we continue to explore cannabis in Black Oklahoma, we listen to the perspectives of a cannabis dispensary owner and a community activist located about 10 blocks from each other in North Tulsa. Dion Berryhill is the owner of the Golden Circle Dispensary. Before opening his dispensary, Dion had worked in Texas oil fields and the real estate industry. Dion decided to use his knowledge and experience in real estate and join the booming cannabis industry here in Oklahoma, opening his dispensary in North Tulsa in 2020. Dion describes going through the challenges and successes of opening his dispensary during the height of COVID-19.
It took me all of 2020 when I started trying to get this established, and that was when it was COVID crazy out here. It was a lot of stuff on hold, a lot of hold up with getting the license with MMA, and that's a whole nother story. There was still a lot of hurdles, a lot of stuff I had to do, and a lot of setbacks. Losses too, because I'm thinking that I'm ready to open, but then here comes something else you need to get. Some other entity that regulates something that I have to do. I took losses as well, but we finally made it, and it wasn't just a total bad experience, but it was definitely time consuming. My dispensary is in the heart of North Tulsa, which is the Black community. I'm just blessed and thankful to be able to have a business right there in my community, right there where I grew up, and being able to supply people with good quality organic medicine.
Dion explains the medicinal benefits of cannabis for his customers.
Marijuana use from a dispensary owner, these are patients. These are patients coming in here. People come in here every day for hip pain, arthritis, joint pain, seizures, migraines, numerous things. And because of cannabis being legal, they are able to use this to treat these illnesses and these problems and stuff with their health naturally, organically.
He describes how his dispensary is helping his community.
There's numerous dispensaries in our community. They all have 3 to 4 different bud tenders, so we're offering jobs. And I would think we're eliminating crime and stuff as well, because it's legal, and it's helping out because, like I said, this is medicine. So now people come and get their medication and really help their health issues without having to do stuff on the street and meet somebody at the corner or outside late night. It just makes it people can come get their medicine that really helps them in a safe environment. And then as far as the tax dollars that are being generated from this medical marijuana are doing amazing things. amazing things, making our whole city, our whole state great because of the taxes being generated from this. So overall, I mean, it's all positive. I don't see no negative.
When asked about issues of security, Dion admitted nearby dispensaries had experienced break-ins, but that he has security measures in place to keep his facility and staff safe. Regarding the low number of Black-owned dispensaries, Dion believes community unity, business savvy, and an entrepreneurial spirit can help narrow the gap.
Staying ready so you don't got to get ready. So when doors open up, the opportunities present themselves, have the right tools, and be in a financial place to be able to take advantage of these opportunities.
Tracy Chandler is a retired teacher who has worked for several years as a community advocate and activist. Currently, she is president of the Phoenix Development Council, a neighborhood association centrally located in North Tulsa that is working to bring entrepreneurial and economic development to 36th Street North. As we discussed the issue of cannabis dispensaries in her community, Ms. Chandler recalls attending a workshop years ago and learning about how legal medicinal cannabis significantly reduced the number of seizures in a young patient.
So I understand the medical reasoning and need for it. As a matter of fact, a member of my church came and asked me, what did I think about it? And I shared the same story. And I said, well, if you have a problem, then you should petition that it become legal.
She goes on to explain her issue with cannabis dispensaries in her community.
The challenge that I have with that, especially in my own community in North Tulsa, is that we have, in my opinion, way too many dispensaries. I would venture to say within a 2 to 3 mile radius, we have about 10. So what's the problem with that? Those spots reduce the spaces that could be used for other things that we need in the community. We don't have a grocery store. We don't even have a restaurant. There's no place to buy the shoes, no place to buy the clothing, no place for entertainment. So I truly believe that there should be regulation as to how many can be within a community. And in our community, we were fighting against a dispensary coming to 36th Street North and Lansing Place. That would have been a better spot for something that would be more beneficial for the community, because just a block away, we already had a dispensary. And there were those who were of the misguided opinion that you can't tell somebody what to do with their property. Well, I beg to differ. That's what the zoning laws are for. And that's what they had come before us with a request to change the zoning laws. So about 1,500 of us that were against the dispensary, but everybody that made the decision voted to change the zoning. So I have a problem with that.
Ms. Chandler does not believe that Black dispensaries and growers should be put out of the market, but that the focus should be on building up the area.
The city should look at what is going on. What does that community have? What does that community need? And look at it from a practical standpoint and not just about dollars and cents. We should be able to get our needs met within our community.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Judy Williams in Tulsa.
A University of Oklahoma professor has been honored for her poetry on the national stage. Brittany Cordera has details on the professor's major literary prize.
Honore Jeffers is a poet, novelist, and English professor at University of Oklahoma. She has published 5 collections of poetry and 1 novel. Her 2020 collection of poetry, The Age of Phyllis, rethinks the era of Phyllis Wheatley Peters and received the 2021 NAACP Image Award. The Image Award grants recognition to 8 genres of literature and started recognizing poetry in 2007. Jeffers isn't just proud to receive this award, but honored.
The NAACP
is so important to African American, really BIPOC individuals. And so, I grew up on, watching that when they finally started televising them, watching the Image Awards or whatever. And so it was also really interesting because that's the first award that my relatives have recognized. I've won several awards, but they never really cared. But when I won the Image Award, I started getting texts from relatives. So that was real nice. I felt like if there was any book of mine that would have won, I was really glad that it was that one. It was The Age of Phyllis, yes.
As the mother of African American poetry, Jeffers makes sure Miss Phyllis's legacy is heard and survives. She says that Miss Phyllis's letters and lesser-known poetry are as much a part of her story as her canonized piece in American literature classes, "'Twas Mercy That Brought Me From My Pagan Land."
I wanted people to really get the vibe, of who she was. And I think that in order to do that, people need to read more than just that one poem. Her letters are very, particularly the one to Samson Occam, where she's talking about freedom. And freedom is something that every person has access to. That goes against the entire narrative. Right. So I think that letters are very important when you're teaching slave narratives, not just those in the 19th century. Right. But like correspondence is a narrative. And so I do think that what people have begun doing is teaching my book alongside her work to sort of open up new ways of seeing who she was. And that is why I wrote the book.
Jeffers spent 15 years in the National Archives and the Massachusetts Historical Society conducting research for The Age of Phyllis. The most difficult part of diving into the archives for her was encountering gaps in Phyllis Wheatley Peters' history, like not being able to find the ship she was named for.
I think that's the poet in me, why I'm not a historian, because it hurt thinking that we had all of these details, right? Minutiae of white men in the 18th century, just little things about them. But when it came to white women, when it came to Black men, when it came to Black women, when it came to Native Americans, there was little to nothing. And it hurt. It hurt thinking about historical erasure.
Jeffers wants people to see Miss Phyllis Wheatley Peters in ways they never considered.
The message that she writes in the poem to William the Honorable Earl of Dartmouth, when she says, "I young in life by seeming cruel fate was snatched from Afrique's fancied happy seat. What pangs excruciating must molest? What sorrows labor in my parents' breast?" That she had parents, that she had a family, that she had a life. And while I am very grateful to the Wheatleys for purchasing her, I don't look at them as extraordinary human beings for loving her, if indeed they did, because every child is born with a birthright to be loved. And so I want people to know that she was loved, not because I imagined it, but because she said so. And that to me is what I wish people would focus on. When she says she was snatched from Afrique's happy seat, that's not, thank you, white people, for stealing me from my parents. Snatched is a violent word. And that she would have preferred to have stayed in Africa. So I want people to know that she was loved before she came here. And that was a tragedy that she was taken from her parents.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Brittany Cordera in Norman.
Focus Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio, Tulsa Artist Fellowship, and Tri-City Collective. Our theme music is by Moffett Music. Focus Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quresh Ali Lansana and Bracken Clar. Our associate producers are Nick Alexandrov and Vanessa Gaona. Visit us online at kosu.org, tricitycollective.com/Focus Black Oklahoma, and on YouTube at Tri-City Collective. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Focus Black OK. You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand for free at kosu.org. FBO is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, NPR One, and NPR.org. Please download and subscribe.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by the Black Church Traditions and African American Faith Life program at Phillips Seminary, with an online art showcase of a sacred commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Online at wherefaithleads.com/art.
Every Monday through Friday, the KOSU Daily brings you news on what's happening in Oklahoma. State Impact reporters provide the latest on education, healthcare, and criminal justice, and will have reports on rural and agricultural issues, as well as news on Indigenous affairs. Subscribe now on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on the podcast page at kosu.org. The KOSU Daily, Oklahoma news every weekday.